Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. He detested James Arness to his core. That's what those who were close to Clint Walker have stated. For years, fans were unable to know why. They were both legendary men. Both were titans of the heyday of television. Millions of people loved both. However, behind Clint Walker's smiles and cowboy hats maintained a rivalry that never ended. However, we now understand why. And after hearing the story of how it all started, you'll see why. Clint Walker did not grow up in fame. Norman Eugene was his true name. May is when Walker and he were born, 30th, 1927, in a small manufacturing community known as Illinois' Hartford. His father was employed at an refinery for oil. His mother, who is Czech, sustained the family during the Great Depression. It wasn't simple. Clint began working as a child. When he had already hauled coal before turning 16, shoveled and worked on a steamboat, only to assist scrap metal at a factory provide for his family. Additionally, when World War II, he didn't wait to hit. Clint was only 17. Falsifying his age, he joined the Merchant Marine. He spent his adolescence years spent navigating hazardous waters while most of the males were graduating from high school. Life like that develops tenacity. And he never lost it. At every position he held, truck, bouncer, and private investigator driver simply strengthened his resolve. You stayed away from Clint Walker. However, even despite his statue-like build, he was 6'6", having a strong voice and big shoulders. There was no intention to act, at least, not initially. In the end, he found himself in Las Vegas, working in hotel security and merely attempting to make the bill payments. And that's when everything was different. Scouts for talent observed him, his appearance, and his presence, and Hollywood suddenly came knocking. Clint received his big break in 1955. Warner, he was cast as the protagonist of A Cheyenne is a brand new TV Western. It was the first Western to run for an hour in history of television, and Clint was the face of it. His role was that of Cheyenne Body, a quiet, itinerant rancher who provided assistance people, battled the adversaries, and consistently defended what was right. He didn't talk a lot. He didn't have to. Clint's size, composure, and inherent charm said it all. The program was a huge hit. Audiences couldn't get enough of it. Clint Walker wasn't. He was a sensation, not simply a star. He had his face was on comic books, fan groups, and lunchboxes. Cheyenne created ABC rivals to NBC and CBS for the very first time. 1957 saw it as one of the 10 most popular television programs in marketplaces for multi-et networks. However, this is where the competition begins to develop. In 1955, Gunsmoke was introduced on CBS. With its main character, a towering grave James Arness is an actor. He performed Matt Dillon Marshall. Additionally, exactly like he had the look Clint. Arness was 6'7". He spoke slowly, had a powerful jaw, and a method of holding the screen calmly. Two TV stars, 2 cowboy heroes, and giant stock programs that debuted at the same year. Suddenly, the comparison started. Who was superior? Display. Who was more resilient? Who actually had power the West? Do you see the direction this is taking? And it was personal for Clint Walker. You must know how in order to comprehend why James Arness was given his part. The creators, John Wayne, was initially desired by Gunsmoke to portray Matt Dillon. He rejected them. He had no desire to do television. However, rather than Wayne gestured at Arness as he left. Then CBS said, "This is your guy." He listened. Arness was given the position. Wayne even recorded a unique opening for the first episode, informing the audience, James Arness is here, and he will becoming well known. That type of endorsement transforms everything. All night, Arness became the golden boy of Hollywood. CBS supported him. The media hailed him and audiences came after. Now, immerse yourself in boots of Clint Walker. This man who battled for every bit of achievement. He had no mentor in Hollywood, no ties. He didn't originate from wealth. He actually received found while employed as a hotel guard. He educated himself on how to behave in The Fly. He's now observing Arness, who'd been given a leading part by John Wayne on a platter of silver. Yes, that is going Toto it hurts. By the time the 1958 television season ended, there was fire in Cheyenne, ABC's overall second highest rated show. Clint Walker had adopted a novel idea and converted it into an hour-long adult western, becoming a must-see TV show. The program's ABC remained in the game thanks to its success, in opposition to the larger networks. And admirers loved Clint. He wasn't ostentatious. He wasn't arrogant. He was simply body Cheyenne, fair, honest, and tough. However, throughout the deal, there was going to be another storm. Gunsmoke was a complete and utter empire. The numbers were honest. As Cheyenne generated 7 years' worth of 107 episodes, Gunsmoke produced an unprecedented 20 seasons with 635 episodes. That's over 3 times as long as Bonanza. And Arness continued to play the primary part the entire time. No contracts, no breaks, one cowboy badge, one standoff, won the franchise's face each year. Clint noticed what was going on. His program had paved the way, but Arness was receiving the credit. Furthermore, the longer Gunsmoke, the longer Walker remained on the air, the more A's if his own achievements were being obliterated. Each time Gunsmoke received a new honor, or brought in yet another amazing rating, Clint was reminded of the possibilities and perhaps what ought to have happened. Sadly, he didn't simply lose to an additional actor. He was defeated by a man who, from Clint's perspective at least, never fought as hard as they could. Clint had constructed his career out of nothing. He had done oil work, loaded ships, operated vehicles, and rigs enduring a war. He was authentic. James, conversely, Arness entered into the business with a boost. John Wayne possessed essentially gave him the part of Matt Dillon. The red carpet was brought out by CBS. Additionally, while Clint was battling for fundamental Arness had received admiration from his studio, everything became locked. That sort of comparing things wears you down. However, it wasn't solely for ratings or celebrity. The actual separation resulted from their identities when the no cameras were rolling. Clint Walker. Despite his size and power, he was relaxed in real life. His admirers who met him, he was warm, according to Western customs, humorous and modest. He never behaved this way. He was superior to everyone else. He gave you 5 because he wanted an autograph. He would wrap his arm if you wanted a picture. Over your shoulder and give you a sense of similar to a friend. His co-stars even gave him appreciation. He was referred to as the most decent man I never met. It wasn't an act either. That's his way of life. Now contrast that with Arness. The most of his co-workers would describe him as distant but caring. He disliked doing interviews. He didn't visit gatherings. He was private. Amanda Blake, Miss Kitty's character on, he was once referred to as the mystery by Gunsmoke. Reporters were barred from the set by him. He didn't attend any TV award shows. In his spare time, he would sail, surf, or writing poetry by itself. Some individuals I found that to be cool. Others perceived it as haughty. It seemed like a wall to Clint. He had been raised in poverty. He had battled for each paycheck. He was aware of his good fortune, to be on television and always remember where he from where. Thus, when he observed Arness behaving, indifferent and aloof, it didn't sit correct. Clint thought it was important to turn up, handshakes and showing respect for the viewers. He believed Arness did not share those principles. Additionally, some close companions, Clint was certain that Arness disdained him. Whether it was accurate, Clint thought that James had seen him as less skilled and refined, less significant. And after that conviction took root and remained there. That sort of thing doesn't diminish over time. It simply solidifies. That tension was nowhere more apparent compared to one well-known photo session. The main networks made the decision in the late 1950s to compile all of their major Western celebrities for a publicity effort. It was intended to have fun. A group shot with the Top of the TV cowboys in full costume, pointing their fictitious confrontation with 6 gunmen. The lineup was legendary. Walker, Clint, from James Aries from Gunsmoke, Cheyenne, Richard James Garner from Maverick, Robert Boone from Have Gun, Will Travel Wagon Trains Horton, and John Payne from The Restless Gun. All of them were, all but 2 are, grinning. The smile of Clint Walker appeared tight and strained. James Aries hardly grinned at all. A fan glancing back at the Everyone's photo decades later. Aries is grinning, but what people didn't recognize Clint's expression was equally tense. He was unwilling to be close to Arness. Arness also had no desire to speak with Clint. No yelling was heard, just silence, no drama. You sensed the partition separating them. This wasn't an take action. There was actual frostiness. However, Clint kept it private. He never in interviews, they disparaged Aries. He didn't compose resentful autobiographies. When journalists, he kept it when asked about Gunsmoke. Brief, courteous, yet aloof. He stayed away from the subject when he was able to, and when he couldn't, he provided cliched responses and shifted the topic. But those who were close to, they heard the truth about him. One, it was expressed plainly by a longtime friend. He simply didn't think highly of Aries personally, and that is where the narrative starts. Sharpest bend. Clint Walker accomplished more than simply felt left out. He was burned. In 1958, at the very peak of Cheyenne's success, Clint insisted on a better bargain. From Warner Brothers, he was performing all the task. The program was popular, but the money was not in line. The studio was earning enormous sums of money from the show and from the face of Clint. His picture was on posters, toys, and comic books, but he wasn't being fairly compensated. Thus, he pushed back. Warner Brothers declined. Clint went off the set after renegotiating. Suddenly, the star of the largest Western had vanished. He took a seat outside the whole season of 1958 to 59, and the studio fumbled. Reruns were shown. They offered spin-offs to fill the void. They even brought in Ty Harden, another actor, Toaster in a comparable capacity. Supporters were perplexed. The letters came flooding in. Where is Bod Cheyenne? Nevertheless, Warner Brothers remained firm. However, the longer Clint remained gone, as the sounds increased in volume, ABC desired his return. Promoters were putting pressure on the studio, and after a year, Warner Brothers at last complied. Clint was returned with an increase in wages. Clint Walker returned to Cheyenne following the contract in 1959 impasse. When he appeared, fans were ecstatic. Come back. The ratings were deep but solid. Something had changed down there. The Magic Clint sensed that things had changed. Indeed, the salary was higher. Indeed, he had returned to the saddle, but in the background, his connection with Warner Brothers was permanently harmed. Later, he stated, working made him feel confined on the show. Animal. It felt the same every day on set. Scripts that failed to test him, manufacturing plans that were completely packed breathing room, and a studio that he sensed never showed him any real respect. He wasn't timid, nor about it. He informed interviewers that he desired to leave. He dialed the network system, restricting. The TV grind, he claimed, was a kill's creativity. You could hear that his voice sounded burned out. Additionally, once Cheyenne, ultimately, in 1963, Clint didn't take a look back. However, you are aware that there was still thriving. Indeed, Gunsmoke. By that point, the 2550 had already passed episode number. James Aries remained in the lead, and center, the dependable Dodge Sheriff City. There was never a pause in the show. CBS never needed to rush or occupy space with repeats. No conflicts over public contracts, no drama behind the scenes. Arness just continued to shoot season after season with the network's whole backing, and it has to be a deep cut. As Clint was off-screen is working for justice and observing the decline of his show, Gunsmoke was rushing forward, securing its position as an institution of pop culture. It wasn't just a show in the early 1960s, no longer. It was included in The American identity, Clint must have thought it felt as if it had chosen its favorite. Arness was more than a competitor. He turned into emblem, a reminder of the things Clint never completely understood. Prestige, safety, permanence. Additionally, if you're Clint Walker, how do you handle that? You are unable to contest the system. Thus, you fix your pay attention to the one individual who profited, James Arness most. Although Arness never assaulted Clint, never made fun of him, and never even made reference to him in the media, that didn't matter. Words weren't necessary for Clint. Throughout the year, he witnessed reality unfold, year after year, and it weakened him. In-friends expressed their dissatisfaction in private, remained. He didn't lash out or blow up, out. He did not instigate any public conflict. However, if you mentioned James Arness, Clint would shut down without a hitch. There were none tantrums. Only this little strain that spent decades following him. Now, this is the untamed portion. The majority of those who knew Arness say that he most likely didn't even know how Clint detested him. That was Arness.private. His group remained narrow. Hess stayed away from gatherings in Hollywood. He didn't interviews, barring need. He hardly made appearances in public. Even according to his co-stars, Gunsmoke was a tough guy. To learn more. It wasn't conceit. He was simply himself. However, to Clint, it seemed arrogant. As Arness believed, he was superior to the others. Similar to, he didn't have to work for it. Additionally, Clint, who rose through the ranks from blue collar, I couldn't handle going from work to TV stardom. Money and ratings weren't the only considerations. Respect was at issue. Additionally, from his James Arness never provided him with perspective. That. Worse, the industry never placed them on an equal footing. One fan of Gunsmoke said it flawlessly. As if Clint waist-trapped on a malfunctioning escalator like Arness took, a private lift to the summit. Additionally, that sensation of being marginalized, of Clint never truly left being forgotten. However, something then occurred that ought to have altered everything. May 1971, Clint Walker almost lost his life. He was skiing at California's Mammoth Mountain. This wasn't a simple weekend excursion. Clint was an outdoor enthusiast. However, he lost control after one downward run. Heffel down the slope with a powerful tumble. And then the strange time when nobody could anticipate it. His own ski pole was punctured, through the center of his chest, directly into his heart. He was hurried to the medical facility and declared deceased. That's yes, clinically dead, no heartbeat, no breathing. The conclusion, however, it wasn't. One of the medical professionals double-checked and saw the tiniest glimmer of life. They remained persistent. Surgery in an emergency came after. And in some way, Clint Walker lived through a direct cardiac injury that ought to have immediately murdered him. Even more insane, he was back on his feet in 2 months. That isn't drama from Hollywood, it's true. A man who previously resisted TV executives and studio solicitors now won the battle against death itself. His mythology became even larger. Supporters referred to him as unbreakable, an actual cowboy, Ammon who resisted descending. Additionally, following, that kind of thing would make you think old grudges would vanish, wouldn't they? However, they didn't. Despite having survived a literal Clint, was still holding a stake in his chest. Our nest never warmed up. If someone brought up firearms, he would nod and perhaps say courtesy. But there was nothing love, but no warmth. No, we were all in it collectively. Clint remained icy despite decades later. James Arness passed away in 2011. 88 years of age. Supporters flocked to tributes on the internet. Co-stars recalled him as devoted and giving. The family of John Wayne even released a assertion. But nothing Clint. No comment, no quotation from the media, no homage, nothing but quiet. After 7 years, Clint died as well. He was 90 years old. Additionally, even afterward, the tale of his conflict with Arness remained with him. He allegedly let it go, close to the finish. Some claim he never did. In any case, The two never made amends, never performed a joint or shared a stage. Interview. Two of the most crucial TV history's Western celebrities, and they never succeeded in finding a common ground. Thus, what? Does that tell you? This wasn't merely some celebrity feud. This actually happened. It was individual. It was constructed using years of pride, annoyance, and comparison. Clint Walker, who was angry that Gunsmoke received Cheyenne didn't provide the assistance. James Ayers received the accolades, contracts, and support for John Wayne, the 20th season run, as well as the heritage. As Clint received a fierce studio battle, 7 seasons, and a prematurely swerving career. But Clint isn't a villain because of that. Absolutely not. He is human because of that. Due to upon rising through the ranks from nothing, after earning every inch of your notoriety, it's difficult to avoid looking at someone whose route was simpler and experienced something. Particularly when that someone wins everything you've worked so hard for, and more. Eventually, Clint Walker and two sides of the same coin were James Ayers. Coin. One was the lonesome traveler, the good-hearted man who had Tocklaw for any opportunity he had. The alternative was the Guardian, the television personality with the studio's confidence and never needed to increase his voice must be heard. Each made their mark on American society. Clint will always be the quiet cowboy Cheyenne bod. Fortitude and a feeling of fairness. Ayers Marshal Matt Dillon will always be the stable hand that maintained Dodge City's Verify. And regardless of their feelings, they will always be connected by their names. Not because to their friendship, but because they contributed to the definition of a Western hero, appeared to be together simultaneously.